The winter wind whipped mercilessly through Manhattan's steel canyons as Marcus Chen stepped out of his gleaming Tesla. 20 years of ruthless determination had built his tech empire, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. There, huddled against the bitter cold near Grand Central Station, sat a woman with 2 small children, their thin jackets no match for December's fury. Something about her face struck him like a physical blow, a ghost from his past that he thought he'd buried along with his conscience years ago. Before we begin, let us know where you are watching from, or a simple "thank you" in the comments means the world to us. Marcus hadn't always been the cold-hearted CEO gracing Forbes covers. Once he'd been a struggling computer science student at MIT, sharing instant noodles and dreams with his study group. Sarah Matthews had been the brightest among them. Brilliant, determined, and possessing a kindness that made everyone around her better. They'd spent countless nights coding together, building what would become the foundation of his first startup. But when the venture capital came calling, Marcus had made a choice that would haunt him for decades. He'd stolen their joint project, patented it under his name alone, and left Sarah's contributions buried in lines of forgotten code. Her subsequent legal battle against him had been brief and brutal, his expensive lawyers making quick work of a brilliant mind that couldn't afford to fight back. The last he'd heard, she'd dropped out of MIT, broken and betrayed. Now, seeing her here, Marcus felt the weight of 20 years of guilt threatening to crush him. Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped his leather briefcase, frozen in place on the busy sidewalk. The Sarah he remembered had been vibrant, her eyes sparkling with intelligence and ambition. The woman before him was a hollow shell, her weathered face aged beyond her 45 years. Her children, a boy who couldn't be more than 7 and a girl perhaps 5, pressed against her sides, sharing what little warmth they could find. Through the years, he'd Googled her name occasionally, always finding nothing. Now he understood why. The Sarah Matthews he'd known had vanished into the invisible underclass of America's homeless, her brilliant mind focused solely on survival. He watched as commuters streamed past, some dropping spare change into a paper cup, most averting their eyes. One well-dressed woman paused to offer a bag of takeout food, which Sarah accepted with quiet dignity. The gesture sparked a memory that cut through Marcus like a knife. Sarah, sharing her last granola bar with him during an all-night coding session, saying, "We'll succeed together or not at all." The irony of those words made him feel physically ill. The boy looked up, meeting Marcus's gaze with eyes that held both defiance and desperation. They were Sarah's eyes, and the recognition nearly knocked him backward. A tablet peeked out from the boy's worn backpack, an older model, its screen cracked but clearly well used. The child whispered something to his mother, and Sarah turned, her face paling as their eyes met. "Sarah," Marcus managed, his voice barely a whisper. She gathered her children closer as if to shield them. "Come on, Danny, Emma," she said, struggling to stand. "We need to go." "Wait, please," Marcus called out, taking a step forward. Danny moved in front of his mother protectively while little Emma began to cry. "Haven't you taken enough?" Sarah's voice was hoarse but carried the same quiet strength he remembered. "The great Marcus Chen, Man of the Year. Did you come to see what became of your stepping stone to success?" A small crowd had begun to gather, smartphones appearing to record what they surely thought would become viral content. A well-dressed CEO confronting a homeless family. Marcus could already imagine the PR nightmare, but for once in his life, he didn't care about optics. "I never knew about the children," he said lamely. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy building Chen Tech on our stolen dreams to notice anything else. Danny was already growing inside me when you betrayed us. Everything I owned went into fighting your lawyers. Everything I had left went into keeping him alive." Danny tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, is this him? The man from your MIT photos?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah had kept photos from their college days. The boy's words suggested she'd told them something about their past, about him. "Yes, Danny," Sarah replied softly. "This is the man who taught me that sometimes the brightest smiles hide the darkest intentions." Emma, still sniffling, peered around her brother. "He looks like the man on the big screens, Mommy. The one who makes the phones everyone has." "That's right, sweet girl." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair. "He makes things that help people connect. Ironic, isn't it? The man who mastered digital connection by destroying real ones." The crowd had grown larger now, their whispers creating a wave of judgment that washed over Marcus. He saw them recording, knew this would be trending within hours. Tech billionaire confronts homeless family. But looking at Danny's protective stance, at Emma's innocent confusion, at Sarah's quiet dignity, Marcus realized he didn't care about his reputation anymore. For the first time in 20 years, he was seeing the true cost of his success, and it was staring back at him through the eyes of a family he had inadvertently destroyed. "You know what the worst part was." Sarah's voice trembled as she pulled Emma closer. "It wasn't losing the company or the patent. It wasn't even the money. It was that you made me stop believing in people. I couldn't trust anyone after what you did. Couldn't accept help. Couldn't form partnerships. Every opportunity felt like another trap waiting to spring." She paused, wiping a tear from Emma's cheek with a tenderness that made Marcus's chest ache. "Do you know what it's like to explain to your children why they can't go to school? To watch them grow up in shelters and borrowed spaces?" Danny stepped forward, his young face hardened by years of watching his mother struggle. "Mom taught us herself. She's smarter than any teacher." He pulled the tablet from his backpack, holding it up like a shield. "I learned to code on this. Found it in a recycling bin. Fixed it myself. Mom helped me understand the logic, even though she cries sometimes when we talk about computers." Marcus stared at the tablet. A Chentech model from 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. This boy had taught himself to code on a device built by the company that should have been his birthright. "The library lets us charge it," Emma added proudly. "Danny makes games for me when I'm scared at night." A security guard approached, clearly uncertain whether to protect the wealthy CEO or the homeless family. "Is everything okay here, sir?" "Ma'am." Sarah's hands shook as she gathered their few belongings. A worn backpack, a small blanket, the paper cup with its meager offerings. Marcus watched her practiced movements, realizing she'd done this countless times before, disappearing before authority figures could decide she was a problem to be solved. "You want to know something funny, Marcus?" Sarah's voice was quiet but carried clearly in the winter air. "Every time I see your face on a magazine cover or billboard, I remember that night in the lab. Do you? When the server crashed and we lost 3 days of work." Marcus nodded, the memory vivid despite the years. "You didn't leave until we recovered every line of code." "I stayed because I believed in you. In us. In what we were building together." She looked at her children, then back at him. "I kept that belief alive for Danny and Emma. Taught them that creativity and persistence matter more than money, that integrity is worth more than success." Her laugh was hollow. "Look where that got us." The gathering crowd had fallen silent, sensing the weight of the moment. Someone whispered, "That's Marcus Chen." Another voice added, "Who's the woman?" Camera phones continued recording, capturing every word of this unexpected confrontation. Marcus stood there, his $5,000 suit suddenly feeling like a costume, a fraudulent shell he'd hidden behind for 2 decades. In Sarah's eyes, he saw not just her pain, but the reflection of every compromise, every betrayal, every moment he'd justified his actions in the name of success. And in Danny's defiant stance, in Emma's innocent questions, he saw the true price of his ambition. Not just one life derailed, but generations impacted by his choices. The security guard stepped closer. "Ma'am, if you're not making any purchases, I'll have to ask you to move along." The familiar words seemed to snap Sarah back to reality. "Of course," she said quietly. "We're leaving." She turned to her children, her voice gentle but firm. "Time to go, loves. We'll find somewhere else for tonight." "Wait," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the station entrance. The crowd parted as he stepped forward, shrugging off his cashmere coat despite the winter chill. His fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone, but his voice was steady when he spoke again. "Sarah, I've spent 20 years justifying what I did. Built walls of excuses so high I couldn't see over them anymore. But standing here now..." He looked at Danny's protective stance, at Emma's curious eyes. "I see the true cost of my success, and I can't hide from it anymore." Sarah tensed, pulling her children closer. "What do you want, Marcus? To ease your conscience? Write a check and feel better about yourself?" "No." He sank to his knees on the dirty pavement, heedless of his expensive suit. The crowd gasped. Someone whispered, "Is that really Marcus Chen?" But he ignored them all. "I want to confess, right here, in front of all these witnesses, that Chentech was built on code we created together. I stole your work, your dreams, and your future." Danny's eyes widened. "Mom, what's he talking about?" "Your mother," Marcus continued, looking directly at the boy, "was the most brilliant programmer I've ever known. The core architecture of every Chentech product, the thing that made us different, made us better, came from her mind. I didn't just steal code, Danny. I stole your mother's legacy, your inheritance." He turned back to Sarah. "I can't undo the past 20 years, but I can try to make the next 20 different." His fingers moved across his phone screen. "I'm transferring 50% of my personal shares in Chentech to a trust for you and your children, effective immediately, and I want you to come back, not as an employee, but as co-CEO. The company needs your brilliance now more than ever." The crowd had grown larger, phones recording every word. Marcus knew this would be viral within hours, that his board would be in panic mode, that his PR team would be having collective heart attacks. He didn't care. "You can't buy forgiveness," Sarah whispered, but her voice wavered. "I'm not trying to," Marcus replied. "I'm trying to right a wrong that's haunted me for 20 years. The money, the position. It's not charity, Sarah. It's restitution. It's what should have been yours all along." Emma tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, does this mean we can have a real Christmas? With a tree and everything?" The simple question from the little girl broke something in both adults. Sarah's tears finally spilled over, and Marcus didn't bother hiding his own. "It means," he said softly, still on his knees, "that your mother can finally get the recognition she deserves, that you and Danny can have every opportunity you should have had from the start." He looked up at Sarah. "If you'll let me try to make this right." 2 months later, Sarah stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office on the 50th floor of Chentech Tower. Below, Manhattan sparkled under a fresh blanket of snow. Behind her, a framed magazine cover showed her and Marcus at the press conference where he'd publicly acknowledged her role in founding the company. "Chentech's Hidden Genius, the Woman Who Changed Everything," read the headline. Danny sat cross-legged on her office couch, busy coding on a state-of-the-art laptop. At 12, he'd already become the youngest intern in Chentech's history, his natural talent finally finding the nurturing environment it deserved. Emma had transformed too, now attending one of Manhattan's top private schools, her previous life of hardship already beginning to feel like a distant dream. But the change in Sarah was the most profound. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind of lawyers, contracts, and media appearances. Yet, with each passing day, she felt more of her old self returning, the brilliant, confident woman who'd once dreamed of changing the world through technology. "Mom," Danny called out, not looking up from his screen, "I think I found a bug in the new messaging protocol." Sarah smiled, remembering herself at his age. "Show me." As they huddled over the code together, her office door opened. Marcus stepped in, looking different from the cold CEO he'd been just months ago. The public confession had changed him too, humbled him in ways that made him a better leader, a better person. "The board approved your proposal," he announced. "Project Second Chance is officially greenlit." Sarah nodded, emotion welling in her throat. The initiative had been her first major project as co-CEO, a comprehensive program to identify and support homeless individuals with technological aptitude, providing them education, resources, and opportunities at Chentech. "We're starting with 10 candidates," Marcus continued, "all living in shelters, all showing remarkable potential. Just like us," Sarah finished softly. She looked at Danny, still absorbed in his code, then out at the city where she'd once huddled in doorways with her children. "Sometimes the longest way home is the one that matters most." Emma burst into the office, her school uniform slightly rumpled. "Mommy, I got an A on my science project." She paused, seeing Marcus. "Oh, hi, Uncle Marcus." The title, one Emma had bestowed on him weeks ago, still made Marcus's eyes mist over. "Hey, princess, ready for our coding lesson?" As Sarah watched her daughter climb onto Marcus's lap, eager to show him her project, she reflected on the strange paths life could take. 20 years ago, betrayal had shattered her world. Now, that same betrayal and its redemption had opened doors she'd thought forever closed. "Life's funny, isn't it?" Marcus said quietly, seeming to read her thoughts. "Sometimes our worst mistakes lead to our best chances at redemption." Sarah touched the frame of her MIT graduation photo, recently recovered from a storage unit she'd managed to keep all these years. "It's not about the mistakes," she replied. "It's about what we choose to do after we make them." Outside, the snow continued to fall on Manhattan's gleaming towers. In Sarah's new office, mother and daughter sat together at the window, watching the white flakes dance in the winter wind. Emma pressed her small hand against the glass, her breath creating a fog that quickly faded. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we really never going to be cold again?" Sarah pulled her daughter close, remembering those long nights on the streets when promises felt as empty as her pockets. But now she could answer with certainty. "No, baby, never again." From his corner of the office, Danny looked up from his laptop, his fingers pausing over the keyboard. "Mom, can we help other kids like us? Kids who are still out there?" Sarah met Marcus's eyes across the room, seeing in them the same determination she felt. Their story wasn't just about redemption. It was about responsibility, about using second chances to create first chances for others. Because sometimes, the most shocking thing isn't the fall from grace. It's the height to which we can rise when someone believes in us again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like it and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stop, look closer, and make a difference.